Rescuers have been digging through sand and debris at a camp for displaced Palestinians after an overnight strike by Israeli forces left scores of people dead, wounded or missing. The Israeli military says it struck Hamas terrorists operating a command centre embedded in the humanitarian safe zone in Khan Yunis. Hamas denies its fighters were present. Gaza civil defence officials say entire families disappeared into the sand. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees says the civilians in the Al-Mawasi area had no way to escape.
If you try and picture the area, these are the most crowded surroundings you could imagine. There's barely room to walk in between tents that are crowded onto beaches. It was late at night. Colleagues heard what they believe were the strikes and just absolutely devastating. No way whatsoever that the civilians in these areas were able to protect themselves.
Well, Israeli forces have previously hit Al-Mawasi in their pursuit of Hamas commanders. A strike in mid-July killed at least 90 Palestinians. Well, for more, CNN's Matthew Chance monitoring this from Tel Aviv in Israel. I know that the detail still coming in, but what more do we know about this strike in an area, as I say, previously struck by the IDF in pursuit, they say, of Hamas terrorists back in July?
Well, Becky, I mean, first thing you can notice, or one of the first things you notice when you look at the video and the images that are coming out of the Al-Mawasi region in the Gaza Strip, is that this was a massive attack. I mean, the weaponry that was involved was extremely powerful, clearly. Some of the craters that have been left by the strikes are 7 meters deep. And so an extraordinary amount of damage has been caused in what would have been a densely populated sort of area, a humanitarian zone in the Gaza Strip. And of course, civilians and ordinary people are again paying that very high price. As rescue workers scrambled for survivors, eyewitnesses say the Israeli strikes targeted what was meant to be a safe zone in the southern Gaza Strip, ripping through tents and makeshift shelters, leaving deep craters, and dozens have killed and injured. They told us this area was safe, says this man. I swear the people here were just normal, he says, not fighters. By daylight, you can see the extent of the destruction. Israel's military says it conducted a precise strike on Hamas terrorists, operating a command and control centre inside this humanitarian zone. An IDF statement says prior to the strike, numerous steps were taken to mitigate the risk of harming civilians. But this was a heavily populated area, and civilians were caught up in the powerful blasts. This man says his 2 daughters were completely buried under the sand. Only one survived, he says. And he says he found the body parts of his neighbours strewn around. This 12-year-old girl is nursing a broken shoulder, suffered when her tent collapsed, she says, trapping her and her mother inside. I was scared because the strikes were so close, she says. Allahu Akbar! Israel accuses Hamas of using civilians as human shields and insists the Israeli military takes extensive measures to enable civilians in Gaza to avoid combat zones. But there's little real security in this brutal war. Well, Becky, as you mentioned, this exact humanitarian zone, this camp, had been struck before back in July, with Palestinian health officials saying that 90 people were killed back then. The Israeli military saying they were targeting Hamas militants, but the health ministry in Gaza, which is controlled by Hamas, of course, saying that at least half of that figure were women and children. So, again, underlining just what a poor state of security exists inside the Gaza Strip.
Matthew, meantime, the IDF has said an investigation has been launched into the death last week of an American killed in the West Bank. Now, the US Secretary of State has just weighed in on that. So I want you and our viewers just to have a listen to what Antony Blinken has just said.
No one should be shot and killed for attending a protest. No one should have to put their life at risk just for freely expressing their views. In our judgment, Israeli security forces need to make some fundamental changes in the way that they operate in the West Bank, including changes to their rules of engagement.
Well, I assume we haven't yet had an IDF statement in response to Antony Blinken's words, which were in the past couple of hours. But what are the IDF saying at this point? They've said that they've launched an investigation. Do we have results of that?
The investigation's been launched, certainly, to try and get to the bottom of it. There's been a sort of preliminary announcement by the Israeli Defense Forces saying that they believe that the killing of this American-Turkish activist, Ayşenur Ezgi Agi, was unintentional and indirect. And they said that actually what they've learned is that the shots were fired at one of the protesters that had been hurling stones and burning tyres in front of Israeli forces in the West Bank. But we're expecting more information to come out in the hours ahead. There's going to be a briefing shortly with the chief spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, and so we might get some more clarity. But clearly, the United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, they're not happy at all that another American, and there's been a couple who have been killed in the West Bank while protesting. To recap what he said, no one should be killed for attending a protest. And of course, he called on Israel later on to fundamentally change the way it operates inside the West Bank. And so signs there that the United States is being increasingly critical of how Israel operates.